Hi, everybody. We're going to start in about 1 minute. We're going to start in about 1 minute. You can finish your conversations, but start grabbing your seats. We'll start in about 1 minute. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. We're going to get started with our program. There are millions of people out in the metaverse and internet watching us right now. So we want to go ahead and be respectful of their time as well as yours and go ahead and begin our very exciting program today. So good afternoon and welcome. I'm Jay Bernhardt. I'm Dean of Moody College of Communication here at the University of Texas at Austin. And I want to welcome all of you to the 20th anniversary of the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas. We can talk about a lot of what happens over 20 years. You know, Scotch gets better and richer, and you know, people grow up and leave for college, and all kinds of amazing things that can happen in 20 years. And many organizations in higher ed, I will say, over 20 years have come and gone and come and gone and come and gone. And it's very rare, frankly, that in higher ed that we get to be together like this and celebrate a 20th anniversary, still with the people who started it too, in charge of it, is even more rare and amazing. So it is truly a special day for all of those and many more reasons. For those of you in the room, I want to remind you that we're going to have a reception with a toast after this event down the hall in the Dean Suite. So we invite you all to come join us for that when our program's over. And for those who are not in the room, who are watching virtually, we invite you to raise a glass in honor of the Knight Center, wherever you are, assuming it's 5 p.m. Or later. Just some background for all of you. The Knight Center was created in 2002, thanks to a generous $2 million grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation to Professor Rosenthal Alves, the first holder of the Knight Chair in International Journalism at the Moody College's School of Journalism and Media. And what was meant initially to be a 4-year project, according to that first grant, as we know, eventually became this 20-year-old successful center dedicated to strengthening journalism around the world. What was meant initially to only be a hemispheric center, focusing on this hemisphere, focusing on Latin America and the Caribbean, eventually, as we all know, became global, reaching virtually all countries on the planet with its online courses, conferences, research, and publications. So rather than simply celebrating the center's impressive achievements and telling you all of the accomplishments and numbers and events and everything else, today's celebration is actually focused on the impact that all of the initiatives through the Knight Center have had on journalism throughout the world and to the field itself. We'll learn about the accomplishments of journalists, educators, students, and citizens who have benefited from Knight Center programs. Of course, it'll be hard to condense 2 decades of outcomes into about 50 minutes of a seminar, and it's much harder when we're dealing with thousands of people from around the world watching and who've participated over the years. And we do know that Rosenthal sometimes, occasionally, speaks and likes hyperbole, but there is no exaggeration in this case when we talk about the global reach of the Knight Center, especially in its second decade, its most recent decade, when it started offering something called MOOCs, or massive open online courses. You know, MOOCs are a thing in higher ed we began talking about, I don't know, 10 or so years ago. And it was going to be the new big thing that revolutionized higher ed and democratized content for people around the world in underserved communities who couldn't afford or weren't able to come to universities like this one. I will say that if in the grand analysis of MOOCs in higher ed, overall, they have not achieved what they were set out to achieve. But in the case of the Knight Center, they've probably exceeded expectations of what we've been able to achieve with MOOCs. Knight Center MOOCs have reached more than, I'll pause for effect, 275,000 students from 200 countries and territories, and that's just since 2012. The Knight, yeah, we should clap for that. That's amazing. Those are not numbers we often get to talk about, again, in higher ed and research and academic centers. The Knight Center is indeed a global leader in online courses for journalists. As we speak right now, at this point in time, there are 3,416 students from dozens of countries taking one of the current MOOCs being offered on how to cover the climate crisis and fight disinformation that's sponsored by the Google News Initiative. This MOOC's being led by our own Professor John Schwartz. Hi, John. Glad to have you here. Who recently joined our School of Journalism and Media after 21 years with the New York Times. It's being presented simultaneously in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. John, I didn't know you spoke all 3 of those languages. Yes, okay. But amazing that the Knight Center has mastered the art of offering multilingual courses in real time. And the English version alone has students from 136 countries, which is 70% of the 193 countries in the United Nations. So truly amazing. In fact, the Knight Center has had multiple partnerships with UN agencies, including UNESCO, WHO, and UNDP. For example, right after COVID was declared and the pandemic started, the Knight Center, working with these partners, created a new MOOC on how to cover the COVID crisis, which attracted 9,000 students from all over the world, was followed by several other courses and webinars in 13 languages. Truly a global research initiative, global reach of a program with massive impact. So on behalf of all of us and everyone who's come before and everyone who will come after, we all congratulate Professor Alves and the Knight Center team, an incredible team of professionals, for their amazing work. And we especially thank the funders, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, that have been a supporter of this and other Moody College programs for many, many years. Not only did the Knight Foundation inspire the creation of the Knight Center, it's always been a generous funder with 10 grants in the last 20 years. In the last decade, several other funders have joined the Knight family to help the center, also including Google. And I'm happy to see among us today our friends Jim Brady from the Knight Foundation, Vice President for Journalism. Welcome, Jim. And also Marco Tulio Perez from Google. Welcome. From the Google News Initiative. Thank you both for joining us, and thanks for sitting in the front row. We're really glad to have your support and your friendship for so many years. And now it's my great honor to turn the mic over to the person who made all this possible and who's had an unbelievable impact on journalism around the world, Rosenthal Alves.
Yeah, 21. 21. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't make me cry. Don't make me cry. Okay. I don't know which mic is working, but thank you so much, Dean Bernhard, for your kind words and for hosting today's event. Thanks for your continuous support to the Knight Center. I believe that only a university that prioritizes innovation and entrepreneurship so much that adopts the motto, what starts here changes the world, would have given us the space and the conditions to carry out the kind of work that we do at the Knight Center. Yes, we are grateful to the Knight Foundation and other donors and sponsors, including Google, that have continuously funded our pursuit of goals to change the world through programs that strengthen and improve journalism around the globe. But we are especially grateful as well to UT Austin, the Moody College of Communication, and its School of Journalism and Media for their invaluable support. As the Dean said, our goal today is not to place too much emphasis on what the Knight Center has accomplished, but rather to tell stories from journalists we have helped and what they have accomplished, at least in part, because of us and our various initiatives. Before we dive deeper into those stories that illustrate our transformative impact so well, my colleague, my partner in crime, Mallory Tenori, the Knight Center's Associate Director, will give us a brief description of what we have done so far, and that will give you more context of the stories that you're gonna hear afterwards. So Mallory, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosenthal. I will try to keep this brief. As the Dean and Rosenthal said, it's hard to summarize 20 years of accomplishments in just a few minutes, but I do want to give you some highlights to help you to understand what we've done over the past 20 years and how we started and where we are today. So it's my pleasure to be here with all of you. It's really nice to see so many familiar faces in the audience and so many people who have been part of the Knight Center for so many years. So thank you for being here today. So I want to give you an overview of the Knight Center's programs with a focus on 4 key areas. And those are capacity building, online courses for journalists, conferences, and publications. Now, I've been with the Knight Center since 2017, but I'm going to take us back even farther in time to the center's inception in 2002. So at that time, the Knight Center was really focused on organizational capacity building, particularly in Latin America. And the center helped journalists in several countries to create their own self-sustainable organizations, really dedicated to elevating the standards of journalism and defending press freedom. The first was ABRAJE, which is the Brazilian Association of Investigative Journalism, which actually just celebrated its 20th anniversary, still going strong. And then among others that are still up and running are FOPEA in Argentina, Consejo de Redacción in Colombia, and FOPEP in Paraguay. And during that period, the Knight Center worked with local journalists to really lead in-person workshops and seminars and various conferences in Latin America. And the journalists gleaned valuable skills from those workshops and also learned how to run events so that they could really develop skills that they could then carry out on their own. So it was also in this first decade that the Knight Center launched a pioneering distance learning program for journalists, which really made us more of a global organization. And Rosenthal launched these courses despite all the technical challenges at the time, and despite people's sort of skepticism about the efficacy of online learning. But in October 2003, the Knight Center launched its first online course. And during the following 9 years until 2012, It offered about 100 courses that reached 7,000 journalists. So those numbers are pretty impressive for the time, right? But they pale in comparison to what we've achieved in the past decade since we launched our MOOCs in 2012. So we launched our first MOOC, which was led by Alberto Cairo, who some of you may know. He is the Knight Chair in Visual Journalism at the University of Miami. And as the dean mentioned, since October 2012, we reached about 275,000 students from 200 countries and territories. So that's something we're really proud of. That's the number we like to share the most. And most of the courses we've offered have been related to digital technologies and have really been aimed at trying to help journalists to adapt to changes in the media environment. But we've also offered courses on a variety of other topics, such as investigative journalism, product thinking, mental health for journalists, online security and safety, and more. And over the past few years, actually with encouragement from Google News Initiative, we started repurposing our MOOCs into self-directed courses. And so we have this really robust library of self-directed courses. We have 60 of them now, which are available for free on journalismcourses.org. So it's sort of this little hidden treasure on our website, which I would encourage you to look at. And since the start of the pandemic, we've also been trying to be more nimble by hosting more webinars that are really aimed at trying to help journalists and helping to meet their needs at this moment in time. So earlier this year, for instance, we organized a multilingual webinar in Spanish, Portuguese, French, and English, which focused on the latest developments of COVID-19 and really aimed at helping journalists to cover the COVID vaccines and various other aspects of the pandemic. So that was of great service to journalists. And then, as many of you know, if you walk by my office in Rosenthal's, we are always very busy planning events. There always seems to be another event. We have one coming up on September 9th related to diversity, equity, inclusion in the media in Latin America. But the largest event that we plan is the International Symposium on Online Journalism, which many of you have attended. We call it ISAJ for short. And Rosenthal started it in 1999, so even before the Knight Center was created. And it started as a small one-day symposium that was in the LBJ room. And Mark Rogers was here in the very early days of streaming it as well. He's our tech person up there in the corner. So lots has changed since then. And in the years since, it has really become this sort of premier global journalism conference, which is widely recognized around the world. Lots of people have said it's the best journalism conference in the world, and we like to not so humbly agree. But really, to Rosenthal's credit, it has really just burgeoned into this amazing conference over the years. And during the first 2 years of the pandemic, we really had to pivot. And so we held it fully online. The pandemic hit, of course, in March of 2020, and our conference was scheduled for April. So very quickly had to sort of transform it into a fully online conference, which we did. And in 2022, earlier this year, we developed a hybrid model. So we brought it back to the UT campus and really tried to be innovative about the ways in which we engaged with our online audience. So this year we attracted 300 people in person and then about 1,300 virtual attendees and had various innovative ways of engaging with them. And ISAJ also has a research component. So we like to work carefully with researchers and try to bridge the gap between academia and the journalism profession. And so we publish a research journal featuring peer-reviewed articles, and researchers present their findings at ISOJ. And that is led by Amy Schwitz-Weiss, who may be watching from afar. So thank you, Amy, for all your work on that. And so that's really interesting too, because we actually publish the journal at the conference as opposed to publishing it months after the fact. So every year on the day after ISOJ, we also host the Iberian American Colloquium on Digital Journalism, which is a conference offered in Spanish for journalists from Latin America, the Caribbean, Portugal, and Spain. And we started the colloquium in 2008, and it's consistently grown every year since then. We usually have about 125 participants or so here on campus, and then many more who tune in virtually. And from 2003 to 2013, The Knight Center also hosted the Austin Forum, which some people may remember in the room. And in the beginning, the forum was where we convened leaders of the journalism organizations that we helped to create. And later, the forum grew into a bigger symposium on important topics for journalists in the Americas, such as the protection of journalists and attacks against freedom of expression. And we continue to explore these topics in the work that we do, and particularly in our Latam Journalism Review publication, also known as LJR. It's a trilingual digital news magazine where we publish stories in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, really related to innovations in journalism in the region, as well as press freedom issues. And it's really become sort of a record of news and information about journalism in Latin America. And we've got a robust team of contributors made up of journalists who live in and report from Latin America. LJR was preceded by the Journalism in the Americas blog, which we ran from 2003 to 2020. And the Knight Center also maintains a digital library, which is another little hidden gem that you may not know about. But we have several ebooks available there on topics ranging from diversity in newsrooms to membership models to global journalism education. So all of those are available for free for download on journalismcourses.org. And to sum it up, there's so much more I could say. I feel like I could talk about this for days, really. But I will stop there and really say that the Knight Center believes that, you know, what starts here changes the world. We kind of take that motto seriously. And I think our programs are really a reflection of that. And we're happy to be celebrating our global accomplishments with you today. And I will say that none of them would have been possible without the Knight Center team. We have a great team that's so dedicated to our mission. And we've worked with many students throughout the years, some of whom I know are watching in the audience. So thank you to the team. And of course, thank you so much to our fearless leader and visionary, Rosenthal Alves. Nothing of this would have been possible without you. So I'd like to just give you a round of applause and thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was great. I mean, it was not easy to put together. You know, we missed a lot of things. But let me start by before I enter the stories that I'm going to tell. Let me explain why today is the anniversary. Today is the anniversary because actually the first day of the Knight Center officially was June the 1st. Of 2002, that was when the grant started working. But in 2000, and the next day, a friend of mine who was a newsroom colleague of mine was killed in Rio de Janeiro, my hometown. And I was here, my family was in Brazil on vacation, and I was kind of crying here alone. And then I went there, and it was a commotion in the country, and so inspired. And I wrote an article saying that he's dead for O Globo, for the main newspaper in my hometown, saying that his death would not be in vain, that we would create something out of that horrible thing. In addition to protesting the streets, I spoke in demonstrations in the street, etc. And then I came back here. Well, the assassins were arrested, actually, which is rare in Latin America. Only this year, 15 journalists have been killed in Mexico. Only this year is unbelievable what's going on because of impunity. But in that case, because of the pressure, it happened. But August 31st, well, then the announcement official of the Knight Center was at AJMC in Miami on August. AJMC is the organization of professors and researchers of journalism and mass communication. So Knight Foundation had a session there, and we announced to the world that the Knight Center was created. And I went to Rio and organized on August 31st, 2002, a seminar for my Brazilian colleagues on investigative journalism, techniques, safety, and ethics. And that was the origin of the first project of the Knight Center, which was Abrage, which is today, I think after IRE in the United States, the largest investigative journalism organization in the world, and is very powerful and a big defender of press freedom. So Abrage is one of those stories of impact, of not what we have done, because we did a seminar and then we paid, thanks to Knight Foundation, we paid for the first years of management, and we created a model that we applied in other countries in Latin America, creating other organizations. Some of them disappear, but as Mallory said, a few of them are still working and very important there. There is a video with some of those stories that we want to play. It's a 5-minute video, and then after that, I will show 12 stories. And I think those 12 stories will, I mean, you can multiply, right? I mean, those stories, because they are emblematic, starting with this in Venezuela. But can we play the video, Mallory? Okay, it's from here. I thought it was there. The video, in the end, it will talk a little bit about my friend Tim Lopez, who was killed in Rio and inspired us. In 20 years, the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas has evolved in ways I could have not imagined. We keep hearing stories about what journalists have accomplished around the world thanks to the programs we offer. So now that we are celebrating our 20th anniversary, we invited a few of our partners and friends to share their stories of the Knight Center's impact.
En el Centro Knight encontré oportunidades que yo nunca pensé en tener. Y esto me ha permitido desarrollarme en esta área y hacer crecer y mantener mi sitio web a través de todos estos 10 años.
I remember sending an email to Rosenthal saying, hey, Rosenthal, why don't we give this a try?
And the Knight Center were tasked with a very challenging task, which was to help us, a group of Brazilian entrepreneurs and founders of media, to launch an association of digital media in Brazil.
Y además, el Centro Knight y Rosenthal Alves fue el padrino de una organización de periodistas argentinos que se llama OPEA.
It was 20 years ago when the Knight Center sponsored several activities and helped to set up this agenda in Brazil. And after a 10-year campaign with so many numerous seminars and workshops, the bill was finally passed by the Brazilian Congress, and it was signed by the then Brazilian president, Dilma Rousseff.
El Austin Forum era el espacio inicial que se gestó en donde se promovían encuentros de proyectos, propuestas.
We had put a fantastic innovative program to train judges and other judicial operators online on key freedom of expression issues, freedom of expression, access to information, and safety of journalists.
Desde el año pasado he estado a cargo de una iniciativa que busca impulsar la diversidad tanto en las coberturas noticiosas como en las redacciones de todos nuestros queridos países en Latinoamérica.
And I remember that Rosenthal is super enthusiastic. He said, yeah, let's do it. So that first edition of the online course was a huge success. And we decided to replicate. After that first initiative, we launched several editions of the same course.
Soy una mujer con discapacidad, una periodista con discapacidad y que he ido forjando las oportunidades a medida que también voy derribando barreras que me ha impuesto la sociedad.
Y tuvimos la oportunidad de integrar a editores, a personas de recursos humanos, a publishers y a diferentes personas de las redacciones, y hemos empezado a tener una conversación mucho más abierta sobre un tema que es sumamente importante a nivel mundial, tratar de que nuestros medios de comunicación sean más inclusivos, más equitativos, y pues yo en lo personal he tenido un gran aprendizaje.
Y fue un detonante y un factor clave para que organizaciones como Abrage en Brasil, se comenzaran procesos que hoy, después de todo este tiempo, perduran.
Thanks in great parts to the Knight Center, I can safely say that Brazil now possesses a very appropriate and robust law that actively enforces the right of access to public information.
And these judges and prosecutors, they are now, based on this knowledge they have acquired, they are taking decisions to protect freedom of expression, decisions to prosecute crimes committed against journalists. Some of these alumni are now Supreme Court judges.
Em 2002, em junho de 2002, nós vivemos um episódio trágico para o jornalismo brasileiro, que foi a captura, tortura e assassinato do jornalista Tim Lopes. E a nossa reação imediata de indignação, né, de choro e de indignação, de se congregar, de se associar jornalistas preocupados com a questão da defesa profissional, com a questão da qualificação do jornalismo, da qualidade do jornalismo.
We launched a year ago AJOR, which is the Brazilian Association for Digital Journalism. We have 91 members as of now, and already AJOR is one of the most important associations of journalism in Brazil.
My name is Alberto Cairo, and I am the Knight Chair in Visual Journalism at the University of Miami.
Soy Andrea Medina, fundadora y directora de Integrados TIC.
Mi nombre es Carlos Eduardo Huertas, lidero la mesa editorial de Conectas.
Daniel Santoro, del diario Clarín.
Mariana Alvarado, yo soy periodista y editora basada en la Ciudad de México.
Eu sou Marcelo Beraba, sou jornalista.
I'm Natalia Viana. I'm an investigative journalist from Brazil.
My name is Guilherme Canella, and I'm the chief of the Freedom of Expression and Safety of Journalists section here at UNESCO headquarters.
And I am truly and immensely thankful to the Knight Center.
Muchas gracias y felicitaciones por los 20 años del Centro Knight.
Y un gran abrazo a todos y todas las personas que trabajan en el Centro Knight y que están siendo lideradas por Rosenthal. Un gran abrazo para todos.
You can tell that this is a little moving for me, but anyway, Alberto Cairo, some highlights here. Alberto Cairo was really the hero for us to have the which mic is working, to have the courage of starting the MOOCs, because everybody was against it. Everybody was saying, don't do it, it's going to be crazy, right? And it's going to crash. Even the host would said, no, thousands of people, you can't, I kept saying that they're not coming at the same time. But anyway, Alberto Cairo is really a great partner, another Knight chair. So now I want to show the 12 stories very quick. We are running out of time, actually. We are late, but I'm going to start with a slide of a quote from Venezuela, because Venezuela, has been facing so many issues in journalism, and this room.es is the one of the native digital organizations there that had been revolutionizing, and we selected those 12 testimonials among hundreds that we received. There is not a special reasons for them, but this story is interesting because Graciela lives in a state, one of the not the very richest state, but the poorest regions of Brazil, and she said basically that she did not know about data journalism, and she took a course with us. She created an agency one that it was the first regional agency of data journalism in Brazil that is now helping other states to have the same thing. This is a professor from Portugal who is one of the enthusiasts that says that ISOJ is the best journalism, and Fernando, right, Sharon, best journalism conference in the world, so it had to be here. Jake had his PhD here, and of course he says how important, and I think Cindy is going to talk about that too, how important ISOJ has been for journalism scholars from around the world who benefit from it, right? This is a journalist who has been threatened, tortured, went to exile, had been persecuted, and she sent us this note about how important it was, the Latam Journalism Review and the blog that preceded it, covering those kind of attacks. This one is from the United States to show that actually we were just focused in Latin America and the Caribbean, but we have a big audience or affiliates here in the United States. And in the case of the San Diego Union Tribune, they created a podcast production house based on our course on podcast. There's another podcast example. This one is from Tanzania, and this guy took, like many people, several of our courses, and he's talking here about the data desk. I mean, the creation of the data desk, and how many newspapers in the world have created the data desk because of the course. You saw Fernando Rodriguez talking. This was very dear for me in particular, because we knew that Brazil needed a FOIA-like law, and we got it. Although the president now is putting lots of things with a 100-year secret, but anyway, at least we have the law to go after him. And the judges course that Guilherme talks in the video, so I'm not going to expand, but you know that we have we know of sentences that were issued by judges who took our course, so we know the effect that it had in the field. And this is one course that we did that was not direct for journalists. It was only for judges, prosecutors, and other judicial operators. But this is very, very important. And now we announced a few days ago a course on election that, again, it's not going to be just for journalists. It's going to be for electoral officers around the world. And this is going to be in 4 languages, sponsored by UNESCO and UNDP. So we are kind of not only becoming global, but becoming beyond journalism, but with things that are related. Our materials have been used in universities around the world and in journalism training, etc. So this story of this lady from Australia illustrates that kind of views, and we want to potentialize even more. Mallory mentioned the self-directed courses. That is a treasure, because we don't have resources to market it well, but hopefully we're going to have soon. And this one is very interesting. He's from the countryside of Brazil. He sent us many thanks in many stories on how much the courses led him to jobs, etc. But in this testimonial that he sent is not only the skills, is thinking different. And now he's working for Deutsche Welle in Germany in the Brazilian service. And this one talks a lot to my heart, because this guy, we did not ask him. He just launched a podcast in Brazil, inspired on another Knight chair, recent Knight chair who created the 1619 project. So he did a version of the 1619 project to retell the story, the Brazilian history. And he says everything I know about podcast and the previous podcasts he did, Vidas Negras, Black Lives, and Negra Voz, Black Voice. He says we'll learn in this MOOC that we had called Listen Up, how to launch and grow a hit podcast. I was in my cell phone in Sao Paulo during the World Cup with Marco Tullio in a bus. And we were, I said, what about this title? And I think the Listen Up, you had the idea. Anyway, okay, so those are the two Elvis stories that I wanted to show. And I wanted to understand that this is just a sample, but we can imagine others. So now let's recognize Knight Foundation through my friend, Jim Brady, an IZOGer, because he has been here in many IZOGs while he was the vice president for the Washington Post and editor of the Washington Post.com. I don't remember how it was called, but anyway, he came in several years. He really honors us with his presence here today. Eric Newton, Jim's predecessor as vice president of journalism at Knight Foundation, was impressed by how active I was in the first years as a Knight chair in international journalism, by teaching frequent workshops and participating in many activities and journalism conferences in Latin America. So one day, Eric Newton told me that Knight Foundation is interested in a way of expand Rosenthal, in his words. The result of expand Rosenthal so far has been this 20 years of hard work of exceptional teams like Mallory cited. We have Teresa and Liliana and everybody else in the team that has have an impact in the region. This support of Knight Foundation has been constant, not only as a funder, but as an inspiration for the work we do here. So today, as a way to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Knight Center, we want to reiterate our immense gratitude to Knight Foundation. And to mark the occasion, we would like to call Jim Brady here to receive a plaque, a special memento that we, and that's gonna be kind of hard to open because Teresa put this difficult so I could, but let's take a picture here with this nice.
All right, there you go.
Yes.
All right.
Here we go. Okay,
right, thank you.
so Jim, would you like to
Sure.
say a few words?
Thank you so much.
That's a problem for you to take in the airplane, but there is a box, right? And let's move the slide. Yes.
And I appreciate the recognition of Knight's role in the center, but grants are only as good as grantees make them. It's easy to write a check, but somebody's got to do the work, and Rosenthal and the team have done it for 20 years and done it well. I want to start by passing on a message from Alberto Barguin, who's our president and CEO, who could not be here today. So he said, I kind of half want to do it in his voice, but I'm not going to because I like my job. I'm glad to add my congratulations to Rosenthal, to the University of Texas, and the deans, faculty, and students who have made this an essential center for journalism in Latin America. It is tempting to stop the evaluation at the number of journalists trained, the variety of conferences sponsored, or the number of courses offered. Much more important, in my view, are two different metrics. One is Rosenthal's and the Knight Center's embrace from the beginning, and long before it was viewed as inevitable or popular, of the new technology that has transformed media and is impacting our understanding of democracy. The other is the contributions journalists have made in their communities throughout this hemisphere, thanks to the engagement with the Knight Center at UT. Even before I came to the Knight Foundation, I admired Rosenthal's dedication to journalistic ideals and in training journalists in service to their communities. As president of the foundation, I've been proud of the fact that he is the holder of a Knight Endowed Chair in Journalism. Knight has supported and will continue to support this essential work. Now back to me. You're stuck with me, unfortunately, physically present here. So on March 12th, 2002, Knight's Board of Trustees considered a $2 million grant for this new thing called the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas. In prepping for this event, I went back and read the document that sat in front of the board that day. Included in it were 4 explicit goals. 1, organizing 12 training seminars each year for at least 120 novice, mid-career journalists in Latin America. 2, identifying and assisting Latin American journalists who either have created or want to create new self-sustaining institutions, working to defend press freedom and the promotion of high standards of professional journalism. 3, holding annual international forums at the University of Texas at Austin to discuss and develop practical solutions to key problems and issues of interest to journalists in the Americas. And last, developing distance learning models on the internet in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. Standing here 20 years later, I have to say, job well done. The center's training output as far as exceeded its initial ambition. I mean, the Knight Center will probably train 120 journalists before I get back to Miami tomorrow afternoon. And as someone who's attended every ISOJ except 2, Cindy, I think you've got all, but I think I'm short 2 ISOJs. I can say with confidence it remains an annual event that's a must attend. And for the Knight journalism team, it is one of our 2 must attends a year. It's that and ONA, the only 2 that we basically say everyone must go to. And it's because of this great hybrid of academia and professional journalism, and this great, also great hybrid of journalists in the States and journalists all throughout the world. And the journalism debate in this country, what the future of journalism tends to be very US centric in the States. And this is the one conference that allows us to bring in people who are learning different things, different lessons, trying new tools. And it's a wonderful conference. And obviously Rosenthal's commitment to press freedom remains really strong. Just recently, we've been on calls trying to figure out how to help Jose Ruben Zamora in Guatemala and other Guatemalan journalists that are in prison right now on trumped up charges. And Rosenthal still brings the passion to every one of those issues when they come up. And to this day, the center continues to produce a significant amount of its work in the 3 languages that it said it would. So it's pretty rare to see a grantee go 4 for 4. In fairness, though, there is one item in the grant paperwork Rosenthal and the center clearly failed to pay attention to. Because the last line of the journalism team's recommendation said, this initiative will primarily benefit only those countries where regional groups or centers exist. Yet, the center has helped create organizations like Braji and FOPEA, and students of the Knight Center courses have created organizations like Agencia Tatu, the data journalism agency in northeastern Brazil. So between the MOOCs, the growth of ISOJ, and your continued work to preserve press freedom in the Americas, it's clear that the impact of the Knight Center has far exceeded the modest expectations that were set by us when we gave the grant. So Rosenthal, thank you so much for not listening to us. And to close, I want to echo Alberto by saying Knight's proud to have been strong supporters of the center, and we look forward to continuing that strong support as you guys enter your 3rd decade of existence.
Thank you so much. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Well, we have a brief panel now. So Janine Warner from Sembra Media, Sandra Crucianelli, who was one of the first instructors of the Knight Center, Marco Tullio from Google, and Cindy Royal from Texas State, and the one that he just mentioned, who has been in ISOJ since the very beginning of ISOJ. Actually, she was in prospecting for a PhD program, and she came to my office and talked to several professors. And I had the draft of the first ISOJ. And I said, by the way, we do this kind of things here. And she said, oh my God, I'm gonna come to when she saw the program. So the idea here is that you talk in that spirit that we mentioned, to talk about stories of the impact of the Knight Center work on your own lives and on experiences that you have or stories that you know about others. So I'll give a little 4 minutes to each of you, and then I think we're gonna do. Can you start, Cindy? Is the mic?
Hi, everybody. As Rosenthal said, I'm Cindy Royal from Texas State University, but I started out as a PhD student in this program and have been really happy to be involved with ISOJ and the Knight Center for all these years. And I was very delighted to be invited to this today to be able to celebrate all your hard work. I think the key thing about the Knight Center, and particularly ISOJ, is the community that it has created, because I can see people like Janine, who was at the very first one. Every time I come back, people like Jim Brady I've gotten to know. And I've got stories about 2 people that were particularly key contacts for me and my network in my future by meeting them at ISOJ. And the first one was Aaron Pilhofer. I met him because you used to do that dinner at Arts Rib House the night before.
Yes.
And I just happened to sit down next to him or across from him with a tray of ribs, and asked him who he was. And he goes, I work at the New York Times. I lead a team of developers that do interactives. And I could tell that he was probably not willing to explain to an academic what that actually meant. And then I started like a fangirl, just reeling off names of projects like, oh, you're the group that does this. And so from that introduction, I invited myself to the New York Times to do research with him on data journalism. And so it's just really nice to have a home for that kind of research, because other conferences did not accept that research. And in fact, one reviewer said, programming will never be journalism. And to see data journalism as such a high percentage of the MOOCs that you have done, I think that I'm vindicated in that regard.
Yeah.
And so then another person that I met years later sitting in the Blanton Museum when we were having it there. Dawn Garcia sat next to me, didn't know her, didn't know anything about the Knight Fellowship at Stanford. She started talking to me, introduced herself to me, said she'd been following me on Twitter. So of course I was flattered with the things that she knew about me. And then fast forward a year later, I was on my way to Stanford as a Knight Fellow. And so that was an incredible year. And from that particular time frame, I created a website called Code Actually to help teach journalists how to code. And now other schools are actually working with me to develop programs around that platform. I got the idea for the new degree that we launched at Texas State in Digital Media Innovation in 2016. From that, we have an enrollment of more than 300 now, and hundreds have graduated with that. So that was a particular program that came directly from contact that I made here. And then also from that time frame, my ideas about product management started in Silicon Valley and how that might relate to news. And that was another thing that a lot of people were like, I did a Neiman prediction early on that said product management is the new journalism, and a lot of people hated that. Well, I think, we see now that there's a News Product Alliance, and
Have you taught a MOOC?
taught a MOOC with people like Becca Aronson, who started the News Product Alliance. So you can really see this thread going through my whole career, from the moment when I just didn't even know what I was doing and sitting at ISOJ at the very first one, to all the things that I've done, to all the students that it has influenced. Not to mention the hundreds of Texas State students who have come to ISOJ over the years and have been introduced to the luminaries that you've had speaking, people like Bob Metcalf, who I have not seen in a while, so good to see you. So again, I could go on for hours,
Thank
and
you.
so we can have our own panel just about me and my ISOJ experiences, but thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much. Thank you so much. Sandra.
Well, I have a lot of stories, so sorry for my English. I will try to do my best. I began in the Knight Center as a trainer of a crazy course called Mathematics for Journalists. It was this man's idea. The journalists studied journalists because they don't like math. So we met in Piura, in Peru. I am trying journalists in presential way. So Rosenthal told me, do you like to offer this course online? I say, what? Online? Do you think that people are interested in this online? Mathematics is so difficult, presentially, so online, it could be more difficult. But he think, no, we are going to do it. So in the first time we admitted 25 students, but enroll 100. So what good? We decided which are the 20.
We were afraid of having more than 25.
Yeah. And the second course enrolled 300. And the third course enrolled 900. So this man did, okay, accepted all. It was in 2003, 2004, and 2008. And the MOOCs, it doesn't exist in that moment. And I think it was an impact to discover that the size of the classroom could be more bigger. And in another way, the course of Mathematics for Journalists grow up to another courses. Digital tools for journalists, introduction to the data journalists, tools of artificial intelligence in the newsrooms, digital tools for cover elections, how to detect manipulation in electoral pools. All these courses in all these years give a lot of examples of impact. I am an impact because thanks to the Knight Center and my Knight Fellowship, I am leading now the data unit in Infobae. And we start with 2 people in the data unit. Now we are 6 people, and all these people took one course, not one, more than one course in the Knight Center. And with new positions, for example, is the example of Desiree Santander. She was born in Venezuela, and 4 years ago, she took the course of Introduction to the Data Journalist, and she write to me, I am moving to Argentina, so I want to join to a team to do data journalism. So I entered to the MOOC and began to see what she read, what she done, and now she's the data manager of the data unit in Infobae. So that's impact for me. It's incredible. So thank you.
Dia. Thank you. Panini.
Sandra, you are one of many wonderful people that I have met because of Rosenthal. So I met Rosenthal more than 20 years ago when I was the online managing editor at the Miami Herald. And I like to say I'm part of his collection of gringos who speak Spanish. He's got a pretty good collection going now. When I left the Herald, I started consulting, and he started recommending me to speak at conferences. And inevitably in Latin America, people would say, so, how'd you get here, gringo? Why are you here? And I'd say, well, Rosenthal recommended me. They'd say, oh, Rosenthal, he helped us create our organization. He helped us get our first manager, executive director. And then I would go to another country and I'd say, well, Rosenthal sent me. He helped us create. So FOPEA, FOPEP, FOPE. I went to the Journalism Association of the Caribbean and got the same story. I sat one night listening to journalists debate who had the best food and the best accent, but they were all in agreement that Rosenthal was the reason they were there. I've taught 4 MOOCs with you. Thank you so much. The first one, much like many of the others, I want to teach a course in entrepreneurial journalism. There are all these journalists starting new organizations, and I know they need the business experience that you and others have helped me gain over the years. I said, I want to teach it in Spanish. And he said, well, I'm not sure what kind of result we'll get, but let's see. More than 5,000 students signed up for that first class. And that was still pretty early. This was 2014. I was shocked, a bit overwhelmed, thanks to Amy and all your wonderful assistants. I think we managed to teach most of them things that were valuable. I know many of them went on to start new organizations. Luz Melia Reyes at Efecto Cucuyo, Andrea Medina, who you saw from Chile, this beautiful little woman whose doctors told her she was too fragile to be a journalist, who today runs a website about people with various challenges in life that she can share that with. So my second MOOC I taught with James Briner, who I met at ISAJ, thank you. Yeah. My third MOOC I taught with James Briner and Michal Jestrebner, who's the co-founder of Sembra Media, an organization I'm very proud to have started a little more than 6 years ago. And our mission is dedicated to helping entrepreneurial journalists, particularly in the Spanish-speaking world, but now we're working on a project in Europe. Your impact has helped us expand around the world. And that organization today has ongoing impact through many, many people. And so this time when we taught a MOOC, it wasn't just me and Midge. It was a whole bunch of the people that work in Sembra Media. And we had the voices of many journalists talking themselves about what it was to be an entrepreneur and how they built it. And that's really, I think, the secret of your success. Connecting us, inspiring us, helping us meet others, and helping us go on to inspire others. And today, thanks to you, Sembra Media exists and is having growing impact. Last week, I was at the media party event at their 10th event in Argentina. And the first time I went there and said, we're starting this thing called Sembra Media, and we're kind of trying to do some research to see what's out there. 6 years later, I didn't have to introduce myself to anyone. But Rosenthal has been the introduction that keeps on giving. And I can't thank you enough for all you've done.
And Marco Tulio is here not only because we want to thank Google for the extraordinary help Google has given us, but also because he was an instructor of one of our MOOCs and was one of the introductions of data journalism in Brazil. So, Marco Tulio, what do you think?
I have to say I'm a little emotional and moved seeing the video because I met Rosenthal in a pivotal moment in my career. He allowed me to be one of the instructors of the first data journalism course in Brazil, which had more than 5,000 students. And I was just like this journalist starting a data journalism career, and he gave me an opportunity. And I quit my job and started working as a volunteer in School of Data in Brazil. Then I went on to be the director of the network around the world, and I'm now at Google. So at that time, the work of School of Data was put on the map in Brazil because of the MOOC. And School of Data today is the largest organization promoting data journalism in Brazil. They hold an annual conference, they have a membership program, they have a fellowship program. They have helped hundreds of journalists in Brazil. And it was because of that tiny moment, that tiny space, well, huge platform that Rosenthal gave us. On the other end, now as a friend and supporter of the Knight Center, I also feel the weight of, I feel so humble and privileged to be here because thousands of Brazilian journalists could have been here telling stories about that. But throughout the years now at Google, I got to know the Knight Center, and I had the privilege to support some of the initiatives and expand their work in Brazil as well. But I wanted to touch on only one, which was mentioned. Well, and I'm part of the web of impact of Knight Center too, right? Because they talk about the Freedom of Information Act. I worked with the Freedom of Information Act as a journalist. I was a member of Abrage when I got to the Knight Center, and also this organization called Ajor. So let me just give you a little bit of color on what happened with Ajor. Ajor was a group of people that I had the privilege to support in 2017. They got together because they didn't have a space, they didn't have a voice in the Brazilian journalism industry to really come together and talk about their own pain points. There was only the National Newspaper Association that included the big newspapers, and they didn't really have a space for tiny digital native news organizations. They kind of had a space, but they didn't. These people, they got together to organize annual events with Google for independent media. But then 2 years into the partnership, Rosenthal came in and said, like, you know, we tried to do this thing called Abrajol 10 years ago, and it didn't really work. And it was kind of what's going on here. So why don't we give it a try again? And Rosenthal led an effort with this group of 8 organizations he provoked them. He got them together. He organized seminars. He took them by the hand for 9 months, meeting every week, facilitating conversations until in the end of this process, they came out with a strong, beautiful Digital News Association, the first of Brazil, that in the video, Natalia said 90 organizations. They now have more than 100 news organizations, digital native. They have a strong charter, and now they're one of the most important news associations in Brazil. So if that's not impact, I don't know what is. So thank you, Rosenthal.
Thank you. Thank you. We have space for a couple of questions if anybody want to make Maria, a microphone.
Rosenthal and everybody at the Knight Center. Felicidades.
Gracias.
My name is Maria Martin. I'm a public radio journalist. I'm an independent journalist. I've taught journalists throughout Central America. I've been based in Guatemala for the last 18 years. And I want to look to the future. What happens after 20 years?
Wow.
Because there are places where journalists, human rights defenders are on the run, where authoritarianism, I don't have to tell you, is on the rise. So I worked with projects with the Knight Center, with rural journalists and indigenous journalists for many years. But the forces that divide in Guatemala are so strong that, unfortunately, that organization is not an Abrage. It failed, basically. But there was a revolution in Guatemala. So I just want to look at what's going to happen in countries like Guatemala, Nicaragua, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Russia, right? And what we need to do for journalists who are going to have to leave and to support journalists in those countries where authoritarianism is on the rise. Those are my two cents.
Thank you, Maria. Anybody else want to make a point or a comment or a question?
Oh,
Yeah.
Just 1 second. If anybody wants to know about the human rights crisis in Central America, I'll be presenting at La Peña on September the 11th at 4 p.m. That's a gallery on Congress. That's it.
All right. And Maria was in our advisory board. We had an advisory board. And Maria was one of the people who, because the first grant of Knight Foundation was for 4 years. And Maria was one of the champions who said, you cannot stop that. This is going so well. You have to go to Knight Foundation and say, no, you have to continue. It's not a stop. And I really had to call because I said, no, tell them that it was the advisory board that gave you this request. Anyone want to make everybody do you want to add anything or? Yeah.
Think of it. I got to go to the 3i conference that he mentioned in Rio, and I had the honor of having dinner and then walking around with Rosenthal afterwards. And I just have to warn you, it's really hard to walk around Rio after a journalism conference with Rosenthal because people were literally coming out of bars to get their photo taken with him. Like I felt like I was walking around with like the biggest superstar in the country.
Because
I just want to be a witness to when I talk to people in Latin America, they all jump in. You can't possibly, with a dozen testimonials or 120, do justice to the personal impact.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And let's have a drink for the next 20 years. We hope to continue that, right? Thank you, Dean. Like the Dean said, his wonderful suite is at the end of this hallway, and we have drinks there, and we're going to raise. We have even a cake, I heard. So let's go there. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.